Name something that gets passed around.
A joint.
A joint.
Now, streaming live on the Marijuana Agenda.
Oh, really? What are you people? On dope?
It's time for Toker Talk Radio.
Hey, this is great, man.
The voice of the Marijuana Nation.
Marijuana is listed as a Schedule 1 drug. That is absurd.
Call in now at 650-LEGAL-MJ. That's 650-534-2565.
What's to keep somebody from getting all potted up on weed and then getting behind the wheel?
Hey, man. Am I driving okay?
Toker Talk Radio is your chance to make your voice heard in the Marijuana Nation.
They're walking on their pants with their cap on backwards, listening to Enema Man and Snoopy Poop Dog.
Send that message with clarity that good people don't smoke marijuana.
Now let's get to Toking and Talking with your host, Russ Belville.
All right. Welcome to the show. Glad to have you here. I got to say, I'm having so much fun running Delta 9 House. If you're a new listener, you might not know, but I run delta9house.com, which is Portland's 420 friendliest Airbnb. We are a cannabis-friendly Airbnb. We got live plants. We got a dab station. We got 4 chickens. I don't know how that fits into the marijuana thing, but I don't know. Actually, when you're stoned, chickens are really cool. And when you're not stoned, chickens are pretty cool. So it works out pretty well either way. But I had so much fun over the past few days with some of the guests because we had a fellow staying here who's from the Dallas area. And this guy, I forced him to say, you got a joint on you. Be a lot cooler if you did. This guy sounded so much like Wooderson, Matthew McConaughey's character from Dazed and Confused. Every time I was talking to him, I could only just think of Wooderson. I'm just like, all right. He was wonderful accent. Loved it. And very conversational guy. And then we got guests in the place today, a couple who've come from Iowa. And I love getting Midwestern red state guests and Southern guests at Delta 9 because it's for them, it's like walking into the land of Oz, right? Because we're in Portland, Oregon, man. We got cannabis plants, we got dabs sitting out, we got jars of weed, and they're just like, oh my. Just agog at what's going on. So check out our listings at delta9house.com. That's our Facebook page. You can go to each room by going to indica.delta9.com and sativa.delta9.com. And there's a special for the last week of July. Sativa.delta9.com, $20 off per night. Just $49 a night. You can stay with us. And our rooms now have TV with cable. You got HBO. You can watch Game of Thrones in your room. Great stuff. So check it out, delta9house.com. Now, going to our live chat room and just talking about that last story with Massachusetts and how the compromise legislation went through and had some questions about that in the chat room. First thing is that the 91 towns that voted against question 4 get the right to ban through their city councils until, I think it was December 2019. Was it 2018? I don't remember. But they got a clause that says, you can only ban up until this time. After that time, all bans have to go through a vote of the people. Well, you know what's going to happen. These 91 towns, they're not going to miss their deadline. They're all going to ban while they can, or at least most of them. They're going to get it done as quickly as they can. And again, some of these towns, their board of selectmen is like 3 people. So they just need a 2-1 majority to ban pot shops. Now, the ban stays in effect even after that December 2019 date, right? So if they institute a ban, the ban stays into effect. If they don't institute a ban by December 2019, then people have to ban, right? So if your town doesn't put a ban in, then you'll be able to start, putting together pot shops in that place. So it's I've got friends in Massachusetts, activist friends that have told me this is really much ado about nothing, because what's going to happen is that Massachusetts is much more closely packed together. It's a denser place than Oregon is. So when a pot shop, when you got a pot hating county in Oregon, it's way out in the east, and it's, it's literally 2-3 times the size of Massachusetts, right? Just a county. And it's all desert and cattle. Then that place banning pot shops, while it really sucks for the people that live there, because they have to drive a long way to get to a pot shop, while it really sucks for them, it's kind of a isolated sort of thing. It's going to happen and not be affected by other outside factors. But in Massachusetts, where they're so crammed together, packed together, it's more likely that one town's going to affect another town. Like those places where you're just driving and you can't really tell one town ended, the other town began, other than a sign, right? So you got a pot-hating town. What's going to happen is the town next door to it that's not a pot-hating town, the pot shop entrepreneurs are going to set their pot shops up on the border of that other town and lead people over in the pot-hating town to come to their town, right? And then that town next door gets its, 3% kick from the tax revenue. And next door pot-hating town goes, well, wait a minute, how come town next door is getting all its potholes fixed? And how come town next door has all these beautiful ribbons and stuff they put on the holidays? Where do they get all the money for that stuff? And they start to realize, wait a minute, town next door making some money off of our people going over there to buy pot. So maybe that has more of an effect in Massachusetts. There's going to be more of a economic battle going on that will lead some of those pot-hating towns to reconsider. So there's something that's something I thought of. Another question I had from the chat room on this had to do with the tax revenue. How can a town get tax revenue if it bans pot? Well, they won't get the 3%, right? So and this is what happened with Oregon too, in some fashion, is that the 3% they don't get, but the 17% that's going to the state through sales taxes and excise taxes, in Massachusetts, that's going into the general fund, and general fund money gets spent everywhere. So yes, some of these cities that ban pot licensees will be able to reap some benefit of marijuana tax money statewide. And yes, that sucks. You'd really want, nope, if you ban pot, you shouldn't get any of the money from it. But that's not going to be the case in the state of Massachusetts, unfortunately. All right, we're going to take a break. And when we come back, we got some more information, an update on that super secret meeting in Colorado Springs. Oh my goodness. Department of Justice, DEA, Drug Czar's office, Vice President Pence's office. Gee, what would the vice president be doing trying to ramp up the drug war? Maybe he thinks he's got a bigger gig coming soon.
You're listening to the Marijuana Agenda with Russ Belville.
Looking for the 420 friendliest way to visit beautiful legal Potland, Oregon?
I'm Lori Duckworth, inviting you to come stay with us at Delta 9 House and Studios.
You get your own private room with queen bed and access to our high-speed Wi-Fi, premium entertainment system, and more.
We'll even cook you breakfast. Look us up on Facebook at Delta 9 House.
That's facebook.com/Delta9House. Delta 9 House is booked through Airbnb.com. City of Portland permit number 17-159855.
Hey, this is Willie Nelson, or Norman. And I smoke pot and I like it a lot. I learned a long time ago that marijuana is a lot safer than alcohol. There's nothing wrong with the responsible use of marijuana by adults. It's time we stopped arresting and started respecting those who smoke marijuana responsibly. To learn what you can do to help, contact NORML at norml.org or call toll-free 888-67-NORMAL.
You're not high. You're listening to the Marijuana Agenda with Russ Belville.
This is high-purity THC content marijuana, and it's not a healthy substance.
Okay, maybe you're a little high.
I'm Russ Belville from the Marijuana Agenda. Join me every 4 weeks for the Freedom Leaf Preview with Steve Bloom from Freedom Leaf Magazine. Learn more at mjagenda.com/about.
I have a package here for Radical Rick. Is there a radical Rick here? How about a Rick Russ? Any Rick Russ? Somebody named Freddie Barack has sent him a package. Anybody? What is that? Sounds like a skunk. It's time for Toker Talk Radio, the voice of the marijuana nation. Call in now at 650-LEGAL-MJ.
All right, welcome back, everybody. It's 10 and a half after the hour here. And yes, the other factor in Massachusetts to consider is Maine. Maine's not that far away. It's interesting when I go to the East Coast, because I grew up out here in the West, where states, span hours worth of driving, right? Driving across Idaho is generally a 6-hour drive if you're driving east to west. Same with Oregon, 6-hour drive. Texas, of course, is ridiculous. Like 18 hours or some ungodly amount. Like El Paso to Corpus Christi. Yeah, it's like a 16-hour drive. So I'm used to really, really big states. And I always forget when you go back east, if you're like in Boston, you're within a 2-hour drive of 8 states, 9 states, something like that. You can get around pretty easy. And Maine's not that far away. You think of Massachusetts and Maine are only separated by that little tiny, I think it's like a 30-mile stretch of coast that New Hampshire has. So if these pot-hating cities are anywhere near that New Hampshire border with Massachusetts, it's not too far a drive to go down to that southern corner of Maine and buy your weed. And it's also going to be interesting to see where Maine ends up setting its taxes, its excise tax and all that kind of stuff, to see what the difference will be. And I can bet you, Sid Crispy says Massachusetts to Maine is 45 minutes through New Hampshire. Okay, 45 minutes. You can bet that road is going to have a whole lot of New Hampshire state troopers on it, right? You can bet that's going to be a trap right there. So as more and more jurisdictions legalize, that's going to be another part of the consideration. Already Oregon's legalization is affecting Washington state, right? They're starting to, warm up to the fact that, we need to legalize home grow. They're starting to, they changed their tax rate. I know we complained about Washington state's being a 37% tax rate. That's actually an improvement, folks. Washington state's tax rate was a triple 25%. That is, they taxed it 25% of the grow, 25% of the processing, and 25% of the retail. So it's just enormous amount of tax. Now down to 37, right? But still needs to come down even further. So this is an issue that's not going away. Someone else in our chat room, Jeff, is mentioning the 2 dispensaries that are serving Idaho right now. So I'm originally from Idaho, from Boise. And back in the day, we used to have to drive to Ontario, Oregon, which is right across the Oregon-Idaho border. It's a town mostly known for its onion farming. It's like a farm, the whole Snake River Valley is just replete with farming. And Ontario is like Onion City. And they got an Ore-Ida processing plant there and everything. But we used to have to drive to Ontario. And from Boise, Ontario's like about an hour drive. Not anymore, though, because now the freeway is like 75 miles an hour for about half that stretch. You can get there a lot quicker now. But back in the day when it was 55 double nickel limit, it was about an hour drive out to Ontario. And we used to have to go out there to get pot pipes. Yeah, that's how intense prohibition was in Idaho in the 1980s, was even in the 90s, looking back. You could not find a pot pipe in Idaho. The paraphernalia laws are some of the strictest in the nation. And so you had to drive to Oregon just to get a freaking pipe, much less some weed. So already, a lot of Idahoans my age who've been long-term tokers, driving to Oregon's nothing. So for the 70s and the 80s, we were driving to Oregon for paraphernalia. As the 90s, 80s and 90s, I should say, we're driving to Oregon for paraphernalia. As the 90s conclude, Oregon passes medical marijuana and is the only state to have a medical marijuana law with no residency requirement. You can be from anywhere, or you could be from anywhere and get your medical marijuana card in Oregon. Now, the recently passed law has taken that away, and there should be a lawsuit that will challenge the constitutionality of that, because that was the original reason we had no residency requirement on our medical marijuana. It had something to do with the constitutionality of it. So 80s and 90s tokers who used to come into Oregon to get their pot pipes, 2000s tokers got used to getting their medical marijuana card in the state of Oregon, coming from Boise and that surrounding area, which now is like a 600,000 person metroplex, making their way to Ontario, Oregon for clinics that would get set up to get their medical marijuana cards. And then once they had their cards, be able to grow, be able to trade, give each other medical marijuana, not trade, that would be illegal, but to give freely, wink. So people would have gardens set up. They'd have land they'd buy in that area, hire people to tend it, whatever, but they could set up their medical marijuana garden and then invariably take their weed back to Idaho, and many would get busted. I-84, that one freeway, became a hip stretch for the cops to be sitting on to pick off marijuana consumers. So now with legalization, the tradition continues. We stopped giving medical marijuana cards to out-of-state residents, but then we made marijuana legal, and it's legal for everybody. Doesn't matter what state you're from. Now, Ontario, unfortunately, doesn't allow for pot shops. It's in Malheur County, and Malheur County is one of these farmer, rancher, conservative, Trump country type of counties. But Baker County is not so much. Now, Baker County extends in such a way that Interstate 84, as you cross the Oregon border, it's just another, 25 miles, I think, because it's exit 376 where you hit Ontario. It's exit 350 something. So it's about 25 miles before you get the exit to Huntington. Now, Huntington, Oregon is this interesting little town. Before Interstate 84 existed, it was on the highway, and it was a fairly hopping place, right? Because it was right on the highway as a place to get gas and groceries, and guys on their way to hunting and fishing trips would be stopping in there, right? But once I-84 was built, it bypassed that old highway. And just like, when a river changes course and it leaves these little fragments, these little sliver Finger Lake type things, well, that's what Huntington ended up. You could still get there, but it was this road that kind of parallels the freeway. So it doesn't get in through traffic anymore. So Huntington is one of these towns that's dying, just withering away. Nobody's going through it, no traffic, no nothing. Until we legalize marijuana. Malheur County bans pot shops. Baker County does not. Huntington's in Baker County. So before you know it, on each end of town, this town is really, literally, the highway runs through it and everything's clustered on the highway, right? So as you enter town from the south, there's a pot shop. And as you enter town from the north, there's a pot shop. And the place is revitalized. Like little businesses in between, the little gas stations and the farm and ranch stores and the convenience stores and everything is just revitalized in this town because these two little pot shops that have a steady stream of cars coming in to buy weed, and a lot of them cars have Idaho plates. So you can't stop it. And the more legalization happens, the harder it is to stop. You've got an entire time zone now. We've got an entire time zone except for that little bit of the Idaho Panhandle. The Pacific time zone, Washington, Oregon, Idaho, or Washington, Oregon, and California. And then there's that little sliver of Idaho that doesn't count. And there's actually that little sliver around Ontario and Huntington. They're actually in the mountain time zone. So there's a little sliver of the mountain time zone that's legal, aside from Colorado. There's two places in the mountain time zone where weed is legal, is Colorado and the little sliver of Eastern Oregon that's in the mountain time zone. Little bits of geographical trivia. Don't want to take me on in jeopardy, man. So this is, for Massachusetts, this is good news because, again, being so close together is going to have this effect, this competitive effect. Being so close to Maine is going to have this competitive effect. And as more states legalize, New Jersey and the others, it'll just get easier and easier to get what we want.
Oh, God, I thought that was absolutely dreadful.
Well, you can't please everyone. Doesn't matter. It's 4:20 here in the Pacific time zone. That means it's time for us to take our union-mandated safety briefing. Remember, light the non-filter side of the joint. That's your safety tip for the day.
At Herbie's Cannabis Seeds, we pride ourselves on bringing you the best quality seeds from the world's most respected cannabis seed producers, all at the lowest online prices. You can find Herbie's Seeds at herbiesheadshop.com. All cannabis seeds are sold as souvenirs and as a means of preserving cannabis genetics. Herbie's Seeds in no way intends to condone, promote, or incite the use of illegal or controlled substances. We strongly urge all prospective customers to check their national laws prior to placing an order. Herbie's Seeds at herbiesheadshop.com. Proud sponsors of the Marijuana Agenda with Russ Belville.
This November, whether you see the words medical marijuana on your ballot or not, the issue is there. From the halls of Congress to your state capitol or city hall, politicians are already making decisions on medical marijuana policy on your behalf. This election, make sure they are representing you. Every vote is a vote for medical marijuana.
Visit votemedicalmarijuana.org today.
You're not high. You're listening to the Marijuana Agenda with Russ Belville.
I reject the idea that we're going to be better placed if we have more marijuana.
Okay, maybe you're a little high.
I'm Russ Belville with the Marijuana Agenda. Join me every 2 weeks for the Cannabis Minority Report from the Minority Cannabis Business Association. Learn more at mjagenda.com/about.
Most of us pirates, we go on vacation to North Dakota, you know, because they've got a town called Argosville. Arr. What are you smoking there, boy? It's time for Toker Talk Radio, the voice of the marijuana nation. Call in now at 650-LEGAL-MJ.
Welcome back, everybody. And before we get back to the marijuana news, I want to talk about just some of the news of the day. We'll get off the warpath here for a second with sad news that Chester Bennington of the band Linkin Park is dead at the age of 41. He suffered a suicide. And notice what I said. He suffered a suicide. He did not commit suicide. He suffered a suicide. I think we need to think about the framing of how we talk about suicide. We talk about suicide like someone did suicide. They committed suicide. He hanged himself, if that's the real definition of what you want. But he suffered a suicide because people who are committing suicide, with the exception of, well, I don't even want to say exceptions. I mean, this is a mental health issue, and the way we talk about mental health is strange, right? Now, read some of the comments about this and coming through my Twitter feed, and people saying, how could he commit suicide? He was successful. He was in a band. He had the world at his fingertips, right? And it's like saying, how could he get diabetes? He was successful and he's in a band and people loved him. How could he get cancer? He was successful. He was in a band. Everyone loved him. When you say that, when you say, how could he commit suicide because he was so popular and everything, they said the same thing with Robin Williams, right? How could he commit suicide? Robin Williams was loved by everyone, right? That supposes that suicide and the depression that leads to it is something that you have control over, or something that is a failure of your perceptions. It supposes that Robin Williams somehow made a mistake or somehow didn't understand how great his life was, right? It totally ignores the fact, which is that depression is an illness. It's a mental illness, right? And you get illnesses. Maybe I speak out about this because it's something I struggle with myself. I don't want to get into too much detail about it. And, sometimes some people say, are you a medical user? Maybe I am. I think my cannabis use definitely helps with a lot of mental health issues, and some of which I think I deal with. But regardless, I don't like going to the medical argument because I think it's an unnecessary argument. I shouldn't have to have an excuse for using weed. But if you want one, I could say that, sure. So it's a sad news. Chester Bennington suffered a suicide from his depression, I suppose. And he was a good friend of Chris Cornell's, Soundgarden, who recently also suffered a suicide. So it's a shame. I just had to deliver that news. And Linkin Park wasn't really in my basket of tunes, really. Soundgarden hit me. Chris Cornell hit me real bad because that was my music. That was when I was long-haired playing music. I played those tunes, Soundgarden tunes, on stage. I covered those tunes, so it was a little different. But sad for Chester Bennington, his fans, his friends, his family. 41's way too young, too. Now, on to another Off the Warpath story. I watched some of this because I had to go pick up the Civic today from the auto detailer. And they had the TV on in the lobby showing a live feed from the Nevada Parole Board hearing for Orenthal James Simpson, OJ, the Juice, who is on parole. He's been paroled. 70-year-old OJ Simpson has been paroled. And this may strike you strangely hearing it coming from me, but I'm actually glad that he's paroled. Yep, I said it. I'm glad OJ is out because the case for which he was placed and given like a 33-year sentence, I think it was way overkill for that case. It was a travesty of justice. It was a revenge case. It was a do-over. It was a makeup call. And sorry, even a guy who I believe committed murder. Now, he was acquitted, but I believe OJ committed murder. Absolutely. Double murder. But he was acquitted of that. So in the courtroom, in the eyes of the law, the only case he should have been tried for was that deal where he's trying to get his sports memorabilia back and held people against their will. It was like a kidnapping charge, and there's some, menacing charges involved there and such. So yeah, that's a crime, and what he did should be punished. But the sentence he got, a man with no record, right? Think about it. He had the domestic abuse stuff that he had the calls on him, right? And he was on trial for murder, but he was acquitted. So in the eyes of the law and the judge that was sentencing him, this should have been, a few years kind of sentence for OJ. But instead, he gets 33, which was not, I believe, not coincidentally, a match for, what was it, the millions of dollars that was in the civil suit, or what he would have been punished for. I forget what the OJ documentary said it was. What was the punishment for murder would have been, or something like that. But it was a makeup call. It was so clearly a makeup call. Now I'm checking out the chat room, and that's right. Hi in Hawaii says, I don't think he did it. I think he was set up. I think, what I think is, thinking back to the OJ trial, I really think that OJ was a guilty man who got framed. Right? I do think OJ did it. And I think the cops, Mark Furman and those guys, knew that he did it, but they knew also he was a superstar that everyone loved and wanted to make sure that the evidence was so damning, there was no way he'd get away with it. That's what I think. I think those cops thought, we're not going to let this superstar celebrity get away with it. Let's make sure there's a bloody glove and a bloody sock and some blood on the Bronco and all that. But I also think if OJ didn't kill them, he knows who did. There's also that theory that it was him and Al Cowlings, right? There's also a conspiracy theory that it was OJ was in hock to the mob or pissed somebody off, and so they murdered Nicole as a payback. But Goldman was there, just happened to be there, wrong place, wrong time. Whatever, right? It's just shady as F. So that said, in the eyes of the law, in the eyes of the justice system, not a murderer, and therefore shouldn't have gotten such a harsh sentence. Plus, the guy's 70, and I don't think he's likely to go out and kill anybody else. So I don't know. That's my thought about that. All right, so let's go back to other stories. Back to a marijuana story here, and this one takes us into the world of sports, and more specifically, my beloved 13-time world champion Green Bay Packers. As PackersNews.com reports that Packers wide receiver Geronimo Allison suspended one game for a marijuana charge. That's right. Oh, no. Football players smoking dope. So we got to cut him for a game, right? So here's the deal. 1 game suspension without pay for violating the NFL substance abuse policy. Namely, he got caught with weed. He was charged with misdemeanor marijuana possession in December after being pulled over for speeding in Wisconsin on Interstate 43. Reached a settlement with prosecutors and will pay $330.50 and do some community service. The charge was amended to an ordinance violation. So he doesn't have a criminal record, right? Was changed to an ordinance violation when he had misdemeanor possession. And $330 fine and community service. Now, that's a nice deal. Pretty nice deal in Wisconsin. I wonder how many other young black men who get caught with misdemeanor marijuana possession charges get those kind of sweetheart deals. Is that only available for standout young wide receivers for the Packers, I'll bet? Yeah, probably. So here's the problem. This is where it really pisses me off. The Packers' opening game, September 10th, is against the Seahawks. I need Allison in that game. I need the Packers to win their season opener against the Seahawks. That has to happen. Now, he's not the leading wide receiver. He's the number 4 behind Jordy Nelson, Randall Cobb, and Devontae Adams, but he was the most impressive rookie last year for the Packers and had an awesome game in the playoffs, or before the playoffs, last game of the season against the Lions. Huge game, 4 catches and a touchdown. But he'll be suspended for a game. Now, he gets the great deal from the criminal justice system, right? $330 fine. But the 1 game suspension by the NFL, that amounts to losing 1 paycheck from his guaranteed salary of $540,000, which means that marijuana possession ticket cost him $33,750. See, we don't bring that up very often when we talk about this fining, this punishing players in the NFL, because obviously, we want them to have the medical benefit of CBD for the traumatic brain injury, for the concussion, for the chronic traumatic encephalopathy, for the anxiety, for get them off the opiates. Yeah, we talk about all that. But we also forget these are guys doing a body-breaking job who get paid, huge salaries to do so. So anytime you're suspending him for a game, much less the 10-game or full season suspension some of these guys get, we're talking tens, hundreds of thousands of dollars that it costs these guys. And I know some people out there are like, boo-hoo, the millionaires have lost $10,000, $20,000. That's all I make. And I can agree with you to some extent. But nevertheless, these guys oftentimes only get to play 5-6 year careers. I had a cousin, I still have a cousin, Rob Morris, who played for the Indianapolis Colts, played like a 7-year career, mostly on special teams, but did play defense, a linebacker, who had got generally minimum salaries, $1 million salaries, that era, but only could play a 7-year career. So he had to make his whole, wealth within 7 years. And did pretty good for himself. He's got, I think, a couple construction businesses and car lots and different things going on. So when you're fining these guys for a game or 4 games or 10 games worth of salary, that's a whole lot of money. And it can really wreck some of the plans they got going. Some of these guys, a young guy like Allison, might be taking care of his parents, might be paying off old debts for the family, might be helping out family members who have medical bills or whatever it might be. And $33,750 for what ended up being a ticket worth of marijuana. That's just something we ought to also mention when we come across these stories. All right, we're going to take a break. When we come back, as I promised, we'll get to that story on the tour, the Colorado tour by some federal officials from the Drug Enforcement Administration, the Office of National Drug Control Policy, the Department of Justice, and the Office of Vice President Mike Pence. And they didn't go to Denver, where people like marijuana, even elected officials. No, they went to Colorado Springs, a military town that's rampantly conservative, where the mayor doesn't like marijuana so much. We'll give you the update when we come back.
You're listening to the Marijuana Agenda with Russ Belville.
New beginner guitars and banjos are often constructed much better than ones built before your time. Why struggle? Get a new instrument or fix the old one. The trusted professionals at the Fingerboard Extension will evaluate your instrument for free. Repairs are priced for people who work for a living. Stop by the Fingerboard Extension downtown Corvallis at 120 Northwest 2nd Street today, or check out its inventory on the web at fingerboardextension.com.
Did you know that in the U.S., black women have the highest HIV infection rates of all women? As a public health professional, I know we can do better. Every day, I work to close the gap in health inequities, but I'm just one person. We need you to join us in this important fight. This October, we're coming to Atlanta for the 2017 Drug Policy Alliance Reform Conference. Join us in the fight to end the drug war. Register now at reformconference.org.
You're listening to the Marijuana Agenda with Russ Belville.
It's like I picked the wrong week to quit smoking.
Learn more at mjagenda.com.
I'm Russ Belville from the Marijuana Agenda. Join me every 4 weeks for the Freedom Leaf Preview with Steve Bloom from Freedom Leaf Magazine. Learn more at mjagenda.com/about.
Pod 2.0. It's not your father's Woodstock weed. It's time for Toker Talk Radio, the voice of the marijuana nation. Call in now at 650-LEGAL-MJ.
All right, welcome back. As we reported earlier on in the show, there was a super secret meeting of the He-Man Woman Haters Club in Colorado Springs to be specific. And it was members of the Drug Enforcement Administration, the Office of National Drug Control Policy, a.k.a. the Drug Czar's office, and Department of Justice, and members of Vice President Mike Pence's office, Mike Pence's office, who all met in Colorado Springs with the mayor and the police chief of Colorado Springs. And U.S. News and World Report has a new update on this. And a few of these things we find out is some of the names of these people. Justice Department Attorney Michael Murray. Now, Michael Murray is the guy who's been appointed head of the Justice Department's Marijuana Policy Review. Yeah, the Justice Department's got a committee going, got a review board going on marijuana policies. Basically, they want to erase Eric Holder and Loretta Lynch, their legacy, and the non-prosecution and under-prosecution of drug crimes generally, and ramp it back up to 1980s decibels. They're turning it up to 11. That's right, Nigel Tufnell. They're turning it up to 11. So Michael Murray was there, and a State Department official with expertise in treaty obligations. Okay, so this is where they're going to start laying down the international law, right? They're going to start saying, hey, Colorado, y'all can't be making and selling and having marijuana like you have it because, my goodness, we signed these 3 treaties with the UN, and you know how we here in the United States stand by our treaty obligations. Never mind the laughing coming from Oklahoma and then southern Florida and Everywhere else, the Apache Nation, the Navajo Nation, a lot of nations out there laughing heartily and sadly. Never mind that. We like to follow our treaties, and by God, we can't have you growing dope. So that's interesting. Also, John Zadrozny, he's the domestic policy advisor at the White House, as well as 2 reps from the White House Drug Czar's office. And they're all part of the ongoing federal pot policy review. The meeting also featured about 20 state agency representatives. And the Justice Department hasn't released much information about this pot policy review. So this is one of the first things we're finding out about it. The officials being asked about this are pretty mum about any sort of questions or statements that were made. A State Department official asked if there had been significant problems with diversion of Colorado marijuana to other countries. Now, this is where the report gets interesting because Colorado representatives, at least according to this report, are telling people that, telling these federal officials that, hey, it's working. Our legalization's just fine. It's great. The Colorado Department of Public Safety rep said, no, not a significant problem. Diversion of Colorado marijuana, legalization, hasn't really affected it. Sure, people grow weed, and sure, they ship it out of state, but this is Colorado. They've always done that. Marijuana legalization hasn't really changed that any. Officials were also there, or weren't there, but United Nations officials have said that these violate our treaties, and so that's why you had the State Department guy there. And they also mentioned the state tax revenue. Again, over $500 million since they started sales in 2014. They talked about how that money has been used for public education, about responsible use, and also pointed out that teen use has not increased. Teen use didn't go up. Kids aren't using anymore after legalization. Why? Because they already had a hookup. Teens already had as great of access to marijuana before legalization. I mean, we'd asked them for 40 years. If you wanted to get a bag, would it be easy or fairly easy? And 80 to 91% of them say, oh, yeah, easy or fairly easy. I can get a bag of weed. How much greater could putting weed in adult-only stores that check ID change that number? Oh, my God, it's inched up to 92%. Right? No. In fact, it went statistically insignificantly, but it went down. It went like a 0.5% down. It actually was below 80% for the first time ever, like 79.5 the year after legalization. Now, it did tick back up a little to like 80.5 or something like that. So really, legalization's not having an effect here. They've just got someplace for their mom and dad to go get weed now. That's all that's changed. Now, the governor wasn't at this meeting with all these federal officials. And then, after meeting with the state officials, the federal officials met with legalization foes in Colorado Springs. No supporters of regulating recreational sales attended. KKTV staked out the meeting and interviewed Mayor John Suthers, who was there, who said that a lot of the meeting dealt with sensitive case investigations. That's why it shouldn't be public. Probably most of the discussion centered around the huge black market that exists for marijuana in Colorado, end quote. Yeah, I'll tell you one of the things that they didn't discuss at that point. That any black market in marijuana that exists only exists because prohibition still exists. Ask yourself this. When's the last time you bought a black market tomato or some black market cabbage? When's the last time you got some black market tea? Now, I'm not saying there aren't black markets in those things. And technically, if you grow a vegetable garden and you sell your tomatoes to a neighbor, that's technically black market. I don't think a lot of that really happens, really, to any appreciable level, because anybody in the United States who wants to go buy a tomato or a cabbage or a squash can go to any number of stores, pick one up for $1 or $2. That's where we need to get marijuana. There's no reason cannabis and the products that come from it should be costing in the $10s and $20s and $30 a gram. That should be the $10s and $20s and $30 an ounce. That's where that price should be. There wouldn't be a black market in marijuana in Colorado or anywhere else if you could get $10 an ounce. Oh, yeah, there might be some people that would sell pounds and cut you, 10%, 20% off what you'd pay on the per ounce price, maybe. There might be some of that, but nothing to the extent of what they recently handed down indictments for in Colorado for that major out-of-state smuggling ring. No, the reason why you have a continuation of the unregulated underground market following legalization isn't because you legalized. It's because you haven't legalized enough. It's because you can still fetch $300, $350, $400 an ounce in some places in the United States. Some places they're within a day's drive of Denver, Colorado. That's the only reason there's any unregulated market still going on in Colorado. It's that the price of marijuana, because of prohibition, is still so radically high that when you start adding on 20, 30% worth of tax on it, that jacks the price up quite a bit. If an ounce costs $10 and you had a 20% tax on that, the ounce would cost $12. Who's going to undercut that? Man, I'll make $1, man. I'll sell you this ounce for it cost me $10 to grow, and I'll sell it to you for $11. I'll make $1 an ounce. Yeah, somebody's going to put a lot of time into that, right? That's what these people can never admit. They can never get their minds around that, because doing so means acknowledging that marijuana smoking is neither good nor bad. Marijuana consumption is neither good nor bad. People choosing to use marijuana is neither good nor bad. It just exists. It is a force of nature. It is a part of our economy. And we can treat it like a part of our economy, or we can pretend we can get rid of it. We can pretend we can force people not to do it. And to some extent you can. Oh yeah, you can force people to stop smoking weed. Sure, when Sessions and these guys harken back to the 1980s, go, my goodness, they got the use of marijuana down during the 1980s when we had Nancy Reagan and just say no. People knew it was a bad thing to be smoking marijuana. And that's when we got, goodness gracious, we had over half of the high school seniors were smoking marijuana back in the 1980s. And we cut that by a great deal by telling them to just say no. Now, what happened is you ramped up the rhetoric, you ramped up the fear-mongering, you scared the hell out of people, you set a standard that told people if they were honest about their marijuana use, there would be serious consequences, so they stopped talking about it, they stopped admitting that they were using marijuana, it went more into the shadows, and sure, maybe some people, scared out of their minds, decided not to use marijuana. Maybe they drank more, maybe they took some pills, but sure, maybe you could scare some people from using marijuana, but you're not going to scare them all away. And if you continue with that mode of thinking, you have to get yourself to the Saudi Arabia, Singapore model at some point. Well, we tried to scare the hell out of them. We got it down from 12% to 9%. So now let's kill their firstborn. That'll get it down to about 0.1%, right? But then, well, right? At some point, a society has to recognize that punishing somebody for doing this thing is worse than them just doing that thing. The effect we get out of it, the results from it, are worse. And this is an interesting phenomenon that you'll find in a lot of subjects. Like recently, I watched I watched this program on True TV. I don't know if you've seen it. It's called Adam Ruins Everything. I love this show because this Adam Conover is a nerd geek like me, and he's into looking shit up and debunking, popularly held opinions. And so one of them, a very interesting show, talked about how trophy hunting, like going to hunt for rhinos and tigers and lions and elephants and stuff like that, is actually a good thing. Like, what? Yeah. And the way they explained it is that you got a country like Tanzania, right? You got your game preserves, and you're trying to save rhinos from poaching. You're trying to save lions from poaching. You're trying to say there's all these poachers that want to kill these rhinos and just saw off their horns to sell for $20,000 a kilo over in Vietnam, where it's supposedly a boner pill, right? It's this ancient superstition. And they leave the rest of the rhino just dead, right? They just saw off the horn, right? So the countries, these African countries, they've got a shit ton of money to hire a whole bunch of game wardens and poaching squads and be able to patrol and feed the animals and all this other things they want to do. So they have these trophy game licenses. They'll sell $50,000 for a dentist to come over and shoot a lion. And then they take that $50,000 and they use it to set aside for land and to hire game wardens. And they actually reduce the poaching because they can do more patrols and all that. So yeah, one lion gets killed by the dentist, but 8 lions don't get killed by the poachers. Sure, one rhino gets killed by a Donald Trump Jr., but 12 rhinos don't get killed by poachers. Right? And so it really had to wrap my head around that. Like, whoa, I had to actually think that Donald Trump Jr. going in and kill an elephant might be a good thing in the long run of things. But it's because you got to look at what the actual consequences are of things. What are the unintended consequences? If you ban the hunting, you lose the money. You lose the money, you open it up for the poachers, right? Well, we got that same kind of thing going on with marijuana. People don't understand the unintended consequences. You ban the marijuana, people in pain have to turn to opiates. People turn to opiates, they get addicted. People get addicted, they overdose and die sometimes. There are consequences to these things, and it's important for us to get past having these moral judgments over things, looking at it as a moral issue, and recognizing people do certain things. Nature is a certain way. The world behaves a certain way, and we can either adapt to it and regulate it and try to reduce the harm, or we can pretend that we can have a moral judgment on it and eliminate it entirely, which never works.
You're listening to the Marijuana Agenda with Russ Belville.
Hey everybody, it's Russ Belville from the Marijuana Agenda, inviting you to be like me and get your ink done at Lucky Horseshoe Tattoo, Fort Worth's most female-friendly, clean, sterile, awesome tattoo shop. Thomas and his crew are true artists who can design you a custom piece or use a design you bring in. Lucky Horseshoe also offers all styles of tattooing as well as piercings and all-around fun. In the DFW area, stop by Lucky Horseshoe Tattoo and tell them Radical Russ sent you. Trust me, it'll feel awesome.
Did you know that in Georgia, 1 in 13 adults is in jail or prison or on parole or probation? As a mother and as a professional, I advocate for access to drug treatment instead of incarceration. We need you to join us in this important fight. This October, we're coming to Atlanta for the 2017 Drug Policy Alliance Reform Conference. Come lend your voice to the fight. Register now at reformconference.org.
The Marijuana Agenda, like the pharmaceutical agenda, without all the side effects, overdose deaths, insurance.
Side effects may include nausea, dry mouth, and constipation. Dry mouth, constipation, indigestion, and abdominal pain,
which can occur without warning and may cause death.
I'm Russ Belville with the Marijuana Agenda. Join me every 2 weeks for Police for Reform with Law Enforcement Action Partnership. Learn more at mjagenda.com/about.
Hello, Mr. Man. Hi. I'm working. I'm sorry. No food till this is done. It's time for Toker Talk Radio, the voice of the marijuana nation. Call in now at 650-LEGAL-MJ.
Hey, Beavis. Hey, Beavis, what's happening?
Yeah, this is a pretty cool show.
Our chat room's talking about Beavis and Butthead. Thanks for bringing that up. And thank you for the compliment on the Jeff Sessions voice. I've been working on that. It's an amalgam of a lot of things. Jeff Sessions to me is like doing Bill Clinton and Forrest Gump at the same time. Like if you mix those two, right? Like you take your Bill Clinton, you take your I did not have sexual relations with that woman, Miss Lewinsky, and I think it's a terrible, terrible thing that you had to say. And believe me, Hillary's a fighter. She's a fighter. She will come back from this and run in 2020. She'll run in 2024. She'll run in 2028. She is a fighter. She'll be zombie Clinton running for president. You take your Bill Clinton, right? And then you take your Forrest Gump. Mama said life is like a box of chocolates. You never can eat just one. And you kind of mix them together. You mix them together and you get a little, have you heard? I cannot believe the people out there that say, have you read this? I read this in the Washington Post. They say marijuana. You got to have that little disgust whenever you say marijuana. Marijuana could be the solution to the opiate epidemic. I mean, give me a break. Just give me a break. Give me a break. Break me off a piece of that Kit Kat bar. I can't help it. Trump, I'm not doing so good on Trump. I'm having trouble getting Trump down. It's really right now, my Trump is my Trevor Noah Trump, right? It's like, these guys are so big, unbelievable. They're absolutely, people, you can't believe it. Now, see, I'm messing it all up. See, too many voices in my head. Can't get them all out of my head. Too many voices. Also, I got to tell you, I did that Harry J. Anslinger video. I'm still waiting to hear back from the people in Texas. So I may have a Harry J. Anslinger voice that I'll have to work up for you. Harry J. Anslinger speaks like this, you see. Yeah, it's like one of them gangster voices. I'm still honing it. There's very few audio recordings of Harry J. Anslinger to go from. So, you know, I do my best. All right. Well, a final story as we're wrapping things up is that story about the Ford Fusions that got shipped out of Mexico, and in the back, in the trunk area, you know the little donut spare tire you get in them little ass cars? They had marijuana pressed into donut spare tire shape for these Ford Fusions. Now, obviously, what should have happened is the trucks that were carrying the Ford Fusions coming across the Mexican border, thanks to NAFTA, should have been unloaded at some point, and the courier was obviously supposed to pick up the spare tire weed donuts, and failed to do so, and then they made their way on to Ohio and Pennsylvania. But it just goes to show that Trump's idea of we're gonna have a wall, it's gonna be a huge, beautiful wall, absolutely huge. Now my Trump's turning gay. He's just a little gay Trump. Oh, it's gonna be huge. It's gonna be absolutely marvelous. Man. So it just shows how ridiculous this idea is that you're going to build some sort of wall to keep out the drugs, when to get spare tire molded, they were molded to fit in the spare tire well of a Ford Fusion. Think about the level of conspiracy involved to make that happen. You got to have the guys working at the Ford plant to put it in there during the process at some point, to swap out the little donut tire and put in the weed tire. Somebody's got to be making those weed tires. Somebody had to come up with the mold to press them into weed tire shape. Truckers to get the truck in, and inspectors to give it the go-ahead. I mean, and you think you're going to build a 50-foot wall to stop that?
Follow MJ Agenda on Facebook, Pinterest, Instagram, YouTube, and follow MJ Agenda Show on Twitter. Learn more at mjagenda.com.
Time flies when you legalize, folks. Thanks for joining us. I'll be back tomorrow. So until next time, take care of each other, tokers.
You grow it, you try it, you roll it, you smoke it. You take a seed, you plant it, you grow it, you try it, you roll it, you smoke it, and it goes down smooth.